at work and you, and I thought if I don't take advantage, it might never happen.
My wife and my kids.
Bob Jensen, did you get a voicemail from me today? I called you. Oh, one.
Yeah, sorry, I missed,
Okay. Okay, gotcha. I was just making sure that I was calling the right number, which I know I was, but I mean, well, I thought I was, I should say. Usually you're pretty prompt, so I figured you were busy.
missed it.
Yep, there was, you got a two for one of them.
Yeah, I know.
Thank you.
Yep.
Admin team tried to put some different groups together. I kind of share what we got there.
Seems so.
Right, yeah, like, what was it, July 27th?
Planning or just the wrap up of the superintendent searches and meeting with MSBA and I don't
We
know.
we haven't decided yet, that's why I was asking if we make a official decision.
But then it hasn't been.
And I had emailed Kelly on that, saying that we're gonna be out of state, but we will be in state. I told her to
Bobby, what good for you too?
Hi, we can go ahead and call the meeting to order and we'll begin with the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And good evening and welcome everybody. And next we have roll call. Board members are present. Agenda approval. I do not have any changes or amendments that I know of, so entertain a motion to approve as you have it.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Ethan, second by Bob Woods. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. Mustang Spirit Recognition. Do we have any Mustang Spirit Recognition? Brent?
Can I fit in here? All right. I would like to represent the other principals, and we would like to thank someone who has worked in our district for 11 years. And I think no matter how you compare our district to other school districts, whether it is student achievement, financial stability, activities, involvement, more opportunities for kids, however you want to break it down, I put more schools up with any other district in the state. And that happened under the tutelage of Mr. Craig Schultz, our superintendent. And I want to thank you for being a great boss and a leader for us four, and the whole district. It means the world.
Forgot. This is the June board meeting. I was just trying to forget. All right. Thank you, Brent. Well said. Any other Mustang Spirit recognition? Mr. Paul?
Also from the elementary, we looked at two names that came forward. There were a lot of people that we could choose from, but two names that came forward quite often: Barb Johnson, Lois picked, just for always being willing to volunteer. When we had a purple and gold schedule throughout COVID-19, and they were in early, they were in on their unscheduled days. If we pushed out an email and asked for help, those were two names that always stepped forward. So kudos to those two for always going above and beyond.
Yes. All right, any other Mustang Spirit recognition? We will move on then to the first open forum. I do not have any requests from anybody, but is there anybody here that would like to address the board at this time? Seeing none, we will move into the presentation of preliminary planning for fall. Brenda.
All right. So we began the process of looking at fall like the rest of the state and the rest of the country, and quite frankly around the world, of what does education look like now. So I found this quote, which I thought was I really liked it. So over the next few months we'll see many plans, and there are so many plans and requirements and recommendations floating out there right now. The successful ones will have one thing in common: they will be written or at least co-written by teachers, which I really really appreciated the emphasis on teachers. Then I started thinking about that, and I started looking around at the food service and the transportation and the custodial staff, superintendents, admin, teachers, you name it, school board. You could substitute any one of those departments, people, positions, and put it right there with teachers, because it will take all of us to come up with this plan to make it successful. We can't forget any of those components, including the community, the parents, what it looks like at home, what the bus ride looks like. We're gonna have to consider so many elements that you could just put it there right with teachers. So the guidance from Minnesota came out on June 18th. Some guidance, the beginning of the guidance. And so in consultation with MDH and MDE, they will determine and announce a scenario model under which schools may reopen for next year by the week of July 27th. They had said by the end of that week, then they said the week of, and this states by the week of July. So sometime during that week, we expect to get our final determination of what model we'll be using in the fall. Future decisions to increase or loosen will go with how COVID reacts. Are situations getting worse? Are they stabilizing? Are they getting better? And then schools may choose to implement strategies that are more restrictive, but not less restrictive. If they say we have to distance learn, we can't choose to come to school in person. But if they say we can come to school in person, we can choose to do a hybrid model. So there's some choice there, but only if we are more restrictive than the state. So all districts in the state have to plan for 3 learning models. The reasoning behind that is, first of all, we're not gonna know until last minute what the state's gonna tell us to do, number one. And number two, during the school year, we could flex in and out of those models depending upon COVID. If it's getting worse, they might tell us all to distance learn. If it's stabilizing or getting better, we might be able to all come back to school. But each quarter or semester could look different. So we have to plan for each one ahead of time so we can easily transition in between those. So scenario 1, in-person model, all students and staff back at school with some restrictions and accommodations, of course. Scenario 2 is a hybrid model of some sort. 50% max capacity, however, on buses and in the school at any time. 50% of the students and staff might be there. And then scenario 3, distance learning model, just like we did in the spring. All students distance learn. These 3 plans have to have a continuity with teaching and learning and consider all the key functions, transportation, food service, the daycare for critical workers. They must be, it must be posted to our website like the summer and the spring plan were, and communicated out. And then each scenario has required elements, things we don't have choice on, and then recommended practices, things that we can choose to do, we can tweak, we can do what's best for Mora with those recommended practices. It also recommends that we create an advisory group, and then we identify a COVID-19 coordinator for our district. That's the point person for the state, basically. So we did already create an advisory committee. So the Mora Reopening Planning Committee is what we called it initially. And it is made up of these people. I think there's 31 people, and they're from every part of our district and the leaders within those areas. Superintendents, so all administration, the directors, the coordinators, mental health providers, Ann and Katie for the health, ECFE, so preschools represented, the union reps, we want the union right there along with us, staff development, Jackie's there, Q-comp pieces, and then our instructional coaches. It's gonna take everybody here coming from their perspective to make our plan come together and be successful. So we included everybody. The goal of this planning committee is, of course, to develop our reopening plan, which will include all the required elements for the 3 different models. We'll consider all the recommendations and then incorporate what works best for our community. We will use data from staff and parent surveys, information gathered from reflecting upon what went well in the spring, what maybe didn't go so great in the spring, and then use reliable sources for guidance. There's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of companies. If you go into my email any given morning, there's ton, everyone's sending you their stuff and wants to sell you their stuff. But using reliable resources, meaning Minnesota Department of Health, CDC, MDE, MREA, these people will be our guiding sources. And then communicate plans to the community in a way that makes sense to them, and then through a means that will reach the majority, if not all, and in the quickest way possible. It's going to be hard because we're going to have a quick turnaround. They're going to tell us what they want us to do, and then we're going to have a plan and then try to get that out as soon as possible. And then ensure staff is well informed, trained, and ready to go for all three models. Belief statements of Mora Public Schools will drive our work. I looked at our strategic plan. I read through the mission and the vision and the belief statements, and it really struck me how well our belief statements go with all the stuff that we're doing. So just as a review, the belief statements. So number one, we provide a quality education in a safe environment. And that's the most important thing we do as a community. That goes right with what we're doing. Number two, everybody has personal responsibility and accountability. That goes for families and students and everyone involved in this process. Number three, we have a high quality staff that adapts to change and provides meaningful educational opportunities, regardless of whether we're distance learning, whether we're hybrid, whether we're all in school. We have to provide high quality instruction. Number four, education is the responsibility of everyone in our community, which we know we all truly believe. And then we promote lifelong learning. This type of learning, distance learning, hybrid learning, if kids go into the workforce, if they go into college, that is what they're going to be experiencing. So it is somewhat of a readiness of a lifelong learning. And then partnerships among students, staff, community, and families are vital to our education. And then number seven, we value and we think that each kid has the capacity to do this and anything else they want. So when I looked at these belief statements, I was like, oh yeah, all seven go directly with what we're doing, and I kind of thought that was great. So I included it here. Okay, so scenario number one, in-person learning for all students. We're all going to be on campus. We're going to create space for distancing on the buses and in the school, but we won't be held strictly to the 6 feet distance rooms in the instructional classrooms. In the common spaces out in the school, we would still have to do that, but within the learning instructional environment, you wouldn't be held to that 6 feet distance. And then there's a bunch of musts. You'll notice that all of these musts go for scenario one. They also apply to scenario two. That's the 1 and the 2 at the end of them. So we have to provide visual cues for social distancing and COVID education. We have to restrict non-essential people from coming into our buildings. We have to adjust meal service to ensure safety and distancing. We have to have kids come into the school and go straight to their classrooms, no congregating. And the same at the end of school. We have to have a process for students and staff to self-identify as high risk, and then have a plan for alternative learning and then staffing too. We have to offer distance learning to enrolled students who may become or are medically vulnerable, and then families that are unwilling to return for some reason to school. We must ensure there are adequate supplies so kids don't have to share supplies. We must establish routines for cleaning, disinfecting, having those supplies available, and then routines for hand washing. We have to educate on signs and symptoms of COVID, when to stay home, when you can come back to school, how you conduct health screenings, and then access to mental health resources. And then how do we provide care for anyone who gets sick at school? There are specific requirements for that I did not itemize here, but we'll have to provide for that both in scenario 1 and scenario 2.
Brother, can I ask a quick question?
In the scenario, when are they requiring any screening to get into the building?
Those are choices we get to make,
Oh, okay.
how that looks.
When we toured, and one school did and one didn't, that made me think of,
Yep.
so it's an option. It's not
Those are
like-
options,
okay.
how you do that.
Okay.
You have to have a process for it, but do you do a checklist? Do you take temperatures? How restrictive you are on that? Those are some choices that we get to make.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Some of the discussion was based around how long will it take students to enter the building if you have 800 elementary kids coming in and you're gonna take temperatures and have them sign in, et cetera, et cetera. So there is some local decision that goes with that, especially if you think about the winter time and having them lined up outside.
Well, just the 30 or so people going into tech, high school, I mean, that took some time. And can you imagine a whole student body coming back to them?
And you can do it as loose as people self-reporting. Parents have to be responsible for reporting, staff have to be responsible. So there's a lot of different ways you can do
Some
that.
flexibility.
Yep.
Sure.
So scenario 2, hybrid 50% capacity model. All students participate in the hybrid model of learning. 50% of their instruction will be face-to-face at school, and 50% of their instruction will be distance learning, with those two pieces complementing each other. What you do in school should complement what you do outside of school, and vice versa. In addition to all the things that we just talked about for scenario 1, scenario 2 has a limit of 50% capacity on buses and in the building, classrooms. You must have 6 feet social distance at all times. If 50% capacity doesn't allow for the 6 feet, then you have to reduce capacity. You have to reduce the number of people, like on a school bus, quite possibly. You must plan for contactless meal and materials delivery for those days when kids are at home, that 50% of the time. And you have to plan for school-age childcare for critical workers in scenario 2 and 3. MREA had this quote, and I thought it was very, implementing a hybrid learning model will be amongst one of the greatest tasks schools have taken in recent time. The training, coordination, communication, and curriculum development all will be large tasks, and that is an understatement. And we'll have to do this very quickly once again, like we did the distance learning, but guess what? I think we can do it. But I thought that quote was a good one.
Can I ask about that?
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily 50% of a class. So you could take 10th, 11th, 12th, and 100% of them can do distance learning and then try, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like those would be easier to do distance learning with group than your kindergarten through 6th grade.
Yes, you can choose to do that.
But they're talking 50% classroom capacity for.
But expand into this
Right.
space or, so.
And there's some tweaks in there, like with transportation, you're supposed to have every other seat with maximum of 1 child per seat, but you can put families and kids in a seat because they're exposed anyway. So
And that family question becomes convoluted because if I have an 11th and an 8th grader, hypothetically, I might have a kid going every day and meeting at home,
Right.
and then you're transferring everything.
No, there's no good
How
answer.
does that, when you have to provide the daycare or the, I'm not using the right word for the essential workers, that would be 100% of the time. So how does that get, if those kids are here 100% of the time, how do the others only be here 50%
I
of the time?
just said to Dan, we need further clarification on that, so
The math doesn't work.
we're gonna contact MDE, because I thought today on the call for sure somebody would ask the question about daycare, because that's hard. And it kind of defeats the purpose, and then do we have to include them in the 50% capacity or not? Or, there's just so many questions around that I don't have answers for. None of us do.
Fair.
Thought for sure they'd ask today, but they did not, so.
it was just last Thursday that we got the 100-page guidance on this, and this is kind of the summary of that for right now.
I brought it for you guys, so you know.
Good. Doing a great
If you
job.
like a copy,
It's gonna change
let
by
me
next
know.
week.
Depends on what it's gonna look like by June or July.
Yeah.
Pages?
Well, and so going with the hybrid model, there's AB then, that's a AB. So do you have AB every other day? Do you have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, every other Friday? Do you have A weeks and B weeks? There's so many different models to choose from. Or do you have kindergarten through third come every day? Just like what you said, do you relocate 6th and 5th grade to the high school and then not have 11th and 12th? There's so many different ways. So when we actually sit down, when the state tells us what to do, and then we sit down as a committee, that's probably going to be the first thing we do is have to hammer out what does that model look like for us. So there's a lot of options there.
And the other piece to this is this, well thought out plan with lots of training on July 27th. The math doesn't work out for how are you going to get people trained up in for a new process.
Yep, there's some thoughts there. So recommendations, I just put some examples of some of the recommendations in there where we're going to have choice of how we execute things. So small groups of students to limit mixing and minimize exposure. So groups of kids will be in classrooms, they'll stay with each other and with the same teacher during the day. Classroom arrangements, including how far we space furniture, what position does it face, using dividing, how do we use visual aids, how do we use common areas, staggering arrival dismissal. Then all staff to use alternative workspace whenever possible, working remotely on days when they can. Meals delivered to classrooms or some variation of that. Discontinuing any large group activities, assemblies, multiple classrooms cannot be on the playground at the same time, things like that. Wearing face coverings and shields. There's a lot of options that go with that. That is a recommendation, that's not a requirement, and how do we do that? Not using things that are hard to clean. And then safe water and ventilation systems and making sure they're all working properly. There's a lot of talk around water fountains. Do you use them? Do you take them off? Things like that. Hygiene, ventilation on transportation. They're recommending that windows stay open on the buses, but we know in Minnesota, that gets pretty hard when it's 20 degrees below. I don't know. And then social supports available at school for staff, students, and families. Do we have enough? We know we've added a social worker at the high school this year, which is great timing. And so those are all some recommendations we'll have to consider.
So practically speaking, nowadays, because I've wondered this for a while, how many students actually rely on the drinking fountains in the buildings?
Well, I don't know. And in the elementary, in
They ever got used anymore.
in the new classrooms in my world, in primary, they're in the classrooms.
Yep.
They're right there, so they just go and get drinks all the time.
And that's understandable, but hallway ones.
And at the high school, we moved to hydration stations with chilled water and some of that.
Everybody, I shouldn't say everybody, but most everybody carries the water.
Yeah, and there's one outside the office in the elementary. I use it all the time. Just go fill my bottle there and
Most students
that's what I do. Yeah.
And just one more question, and with the students staying in the classrooms, that would eliminate switching, so the teacher would be pushing in or going
Yes.
from room to room with the cart?
Yes. And like the elementary, it's way easier than the high school. The high school has many more challenges, and we all know that. Just to minimize transitioning in the high school would be our goal. In the elementary, then, if I'm the art teacher, I'm probably teaching off a cart. I'm probably going to classrooms because you don't want all those kids circulating in the art class all day long. It's impossible to sanitize in between. And then if that person, that outsider, comes into the classroom to teach, then they would probably have a mask, because they'd be someone coming from the outside. Anyone coming from the outside in the classroom would probably have to wear a mask and take precautions. So. And then distance learning, so we know what distance learning is. We all go remote, and kids will have access to materials and receive daily interaction with teachers. We have to ensure that they can participate in their learning. They have access to services and supports, devices, internet, paper packets if they need them. We have to plan for that contactless meal and material delivery, just like we did. So coordinating transportation, food service, paras, like we did. And then school-age childcare for critical workers, community education, coordinating that with paras and the food service, and then facilities. Distance learning is not e-learning. We all remember that. It's not just technology. It's a paper environment as well if needed. And then it's important really important to incorporate what we learned from the spring, such as having a common platform for our families, which we're going to try to do for the fall regardless. And so that is scenario 3 that we have to plan for. Another thing that I've already touched on is that family flexibility. Regardless of the plan, some families are going to choose to continue to distance learn due to health or preference. They want to. And so we are going to make sure that they get to do that if that's what they choose to do. So the distance learning family flex plan is kind of what I call that. It has to follow the same calendar and have the same instructional hours. Attendance has to be taken once a day, and there has to be daily interaction with a licensed teacher. Curriculum follows the same standards, the same pacing. Special education kids have to have support. Social emotional learning has to happen, usually through our social workers do that. Students participate in state assessments, and Minnesota has already said we should believe that our assessments are going to happen next spring. So they're happening as far as we know right now. Plan will include how families will notify the district on how they intend to distance learn instead of in-person or the hybrid model. And then we'll have to have teachers designated for distance learning. We'll have to have in-person and hybrid teachers, and then also distance learning teachers. A great use of teachers who are medically, can't work at school with kids. They could become our distance learning staff once we get to that point. So we don't know who they are yet, but once we get there, that could be a good use of those staff members.
So Brenda,
Yeah.
since we're not going to know for another full month,
5 weeks.
is there any way that this could be communicated now to get in front of the parents that are simply making decisions whether or not to homeschool or not?
Yes,
So that they know that they have the flex option and distance learning could still be part of their students' plan?
Yep, so I'm gonna meet with Dan, and then one of my questions is like, can we start a website for this? I wanna get this up. I do. As soon as possible. I noticed that some districts don't have it mentioned anywhere, and a couple that I've noticed have it on already, and I liked that. Even if we just get a skeleton up there of our plan and where we're going. Yeah. So I would like
It's really critical because we ideally don't want to lose any more families to homeschooling because of this, but.
But we also want to keep the community informed. I think
Well, yes.
this is really good and should be pushed out to our community
Yeah.
ASAP.
Okay.
Just to get the conversation started. It's going to generate,
Even though we
Some
don't have the
negativity.
definitive.
but that has to be in this.
Right.
Is that, this is right now. July 27th.
Like you said, July 27th, that's really late
It
to
is.
do anything, and especially to inform.
Well, and I have had moms contact me, I know Randy has, so
We-
it is out
and
there.
we hear it too. Are you going to have my, second grader wearing a mask?
So if you want, we can start tomorrow, right, Tim? See? Oh, Tim, how flexible he is.
That's exactly why we're presenting this to you tonight. We just got this 100 pages last Thursday, and this is, we're on the front edge of this, and I've seen the exact same things. There was a thing that came out 2-3 weeks ago that said all kids returning to school were gonna have to wear masks, and social media just lit up with what people were gonna do and weren't gonna do. That's why we wanna get this information out in a timely manner to let them know that there are options. I've talked to moms that have said, I don't care if you're open or not, I'm dropping my kids off at 3 o'clock and I'm not picking them up till 3 o'clock and you're taking it. And I've had other,
I joke.
I've had other ones that have said, I'm just not comfortable bringing my kids back in. So I need to know that there's some options for me. I really don't want to homeschool. I really don't want to go online. I did like the distance learning, and what are the options and potentials that we can be able to do that. So that's the biggest reason we're presenting this to you tonight, so that we can get this out there.
And then it'll be posted, so people can watch it too if they want. But yeah, I can use the same stuff and get it up there, so no problem at all.
Great.
So another piece of this is QComp and teacher development and evaluation was paused as of March 15th, whenever that happened. But in the fall, we have to resume it. So, but the guiding question for us should be, how can we use teacher development and evaluation and the QComp program to help teachers navigate all these changes? And then temporary adjustments can be made and we don't have to submit another plan. Site goals have to be submitted out by October 1st, and we have to base it on if MCAs were occurring, and then adjust it in the spring if it doesn't occur. PLCs, performance pay, all of those things have to occur during the school year. We continued some of those things anyway in the spring. PLCs, we continued anyway, just Google Meet, and it worked perfectly. QComp must report to the board next June on how next year goes. So those are some of the requirements of that. So what does it look like for us? June 4th, the reopening committee met, all those people that I showed you the list of. We had initial discussions, options, timeline, talked about resources, kind of just began our discussion. June 18th, just like Mr. Schultz said, MDE released their 100-page document. And then I took that and emailed it out to each of those committee members so they all have a copy. Tonight we're presenting here, which hopefully community members can either watch right now or watch when it gets posted if they're interested. I'll get the information up on our website. From now until July 27th, the people on that committee will stay up to date within their realm of responsibility. Like Callie, every week they're doing a food service director's webinar. So she's doing those every week. So all of us within our responsibility will keep up with what's happening. Mid-July, we hope to get a parent survey out to gauge where the parents are as far as sending their kids, what kind of options they want for a hybrid model. Staff, their comfort, and who plans to come back to school or not due to their own concerns. August, or the week of July 27th, we'll get our final guidance. So August 3rd, Monday, our committee's gonna come back together at 9 o'clock in the morning at the Elementary Commons. We're gonna take that guidance, all of us learning what we've learned from our different realms, and we're gonna start putting our plan together. The 4th, we're gonna give a day for members to go and gather information from the people they represent, if they need to. The 5th, we'll come back together, we'll get our plan complete. The 5th, 6th, 7th, I'll write it, I'll get a final draft written up, give it to the committee to review, and then the 10th, we're gonna get back together, make sure everyone's comfortable with that final draft, and then get it communicated out, beginning on the 10th. I did ask Randy and Nick to have the communication committee help with that process. So I can hand it off, basically, at that point, and have them help me with that. And so get that out through many different ways out to the community. And then I'll come back on the 27th and report out to you the plan and then how that communication went, and see if you guys have any questions at that point. And then training has to happen during teacher workshop week. Any pieces that we think staff need to know, sanitation, cleaning routines, Google type products, training, they're just a plethora of things that we might need to train staff on. We're gonna do it during teacher workshop week. Hopefully fit it all in. And then start school after Labor Day in some way.
My goodness.
Thank you. Very
Sure.
thorough, and it's what you know as of 7:02.
Yes.
You notice on the front page I put a disclaimer. It's as of today. So
We'll let that go.
need it. Okay. Please let me know if you have any questions or if you want any copies of these documents. I can email them to you.
Thank you.
All right.
No problem.
Yes, Bob?
Could we get this not verbatim sent out, like by the communication committee, but Bob?
Right, they're
Bob
not
is,
gonna be-
you can't use exactly this, but Bob's right in that it needs to go out to our community. So I was wondering if the communication committee could put something out in the next week about different options coming up.
What we're thinking.
Yeah.
And then communicate to us. Thank you. All right, yes, we're going to move on into the building project update. Is preparing. Chris Zemer, you have not met all of the
I have not.
board. This is Chris Zemer. He is the senior. What's your official title?
I'm a project director at ICS, so I focus on pre-construction, which is the phase we are in now that we've passed the bond. So we'll talk about that a little bit during this presentation, but this is the first of many to come as we embark on your new high school project. So Sean Lewis is on vacation this week, otherwise he'd likely be here as well. He's senior project manager on this project. But,
You could be senior while he's on vacation.
I can live with that. So. Just bringing a PowerPoint just to kind of show what, it's been only a couple weeks, but we've started delving pretty deep into getting the process going. So first couple slides are just to remind you of the process and the delivery method that we're bringing this project to you with. Then just some initial information gathering, things that are going on in the background that are essential that you may or may not be aware of. Communication decision-making structure, we talked about that at our first leadership and oversight meeting. And then the design process, we've had actually 2 meetings now, as the tours counted as meeting number 2. And then an overall schedule, and then what's next, and then just an opportunity to ask any questions if you have any. So again, we're bringing this project, Jeff was fairly involved with getting the referendum passed with you guys. But now we're kicking off into design. So we're bringing a program manager management model to you in which we are basically the lead on that. We will have all the design consultants. I think you're familiar with that in the past. So the architect, the engineers, very much the same team. And we'll bring that through build and closeout process in the end. So just the structure that, so we'll see this slide probably throughout the process, but again, we act on your behalf. We manage the design consultants. So our team is Obernell with mechanical electrical engineering, Northland with structural and civil engineering. We'll be providing the architectural services and those consultants underneath. And then we'll act as construction manager. And again, with this model, the construction contracts are directly with the district, but we manage them on your behalf. And then this is just a little bit more in depth of our team. So as you can see, Sean's in the middle. He'll kind of be the point person leading all the pieces. I'm a resource to him as we go through the pre-construction process here. You see Arif and Jeff there, Brett, one of our VPs, and then there's going to be a number of other personnel that'll fill in as we go through this project underneath us. So initial information gathering. Right now, there's quite a few things we need in order for the design team to do their work. So we're updating the site boundary topographical survey. We had a lot of bits and pieces of it actually from the past projects, but there are some areas that just haven't been surveyed to date. So that's scheduled. We've also realized in looking at Google and Bing that the photography hasn't been updated for about possibly 6 years of the site. So we have access to a drone. We're actually going to get updated aerial photography of the site because the tennis courts, for one, don't show up in their new location right now. And just as Wool continues to work on the building massing, it would be nice to have an updated site that we can just show what we're affecting as we move forward. Initial geotechnical study or soil borings, those actually just completed, I believe, yesterday. We got an initial report through email today. So again, we had good data from the past building projects, but as we're expanding throughout the site, we wanted to get another initial round of those to understand what we're dealing with, if the soils are consistent or if they change across the site. There'll actually be another round when the building actually starts becoming more concrete and where it's actually located on the site. We'll get all the corners, we'll get the parking lots, where they're located, any field improvements, those kinds of things. So again, the idea is that we're minimizing risk when we get into the bid environment and construction. It doesn't necessarily mean we're not going to run into soil issues during construction, but again, it minimizes our risk and gives us a fairly good idea of what we're going to run into. Traffic study. This one's a little tricky being our current state of affairs right now. This is something that we would have possibly tried to get done in May, if at all possible. But without any kids on the site and teachers on the site, it makes it a little more difficult. That being said, I'm in contact with SEH right now. We're trying to come up with a plan because a lot of school districts are dealing with this right now. But we do know quite a few of the intersections we're probably going to have to monitor anyway. We'll probably do an initial study. The rest might have to rely on modeling. But we do know that the city is going to require some of this information just so they have an understanding of how the traffic around the site, whether we're creating new intersections or using existing operates around the site. Initial and ongoing meetings with the city. So we've had one kickoff meeting just to more of an introductory meeting. We'll have more as we go through, as well need approvals through them. And then the last one is, the main part there is the state of Minnesota technically governs all school construction. Now, they may choose to defer that to the local entity for building inspections, but that is really up to them, and it kind of ebbs and flows at times depending on what their workload is and what their capability of the city and the entity you're working in. So with the state, unfortunately, they are becoming more and more bogged down in processes in the plan review department, so that review is starting to take a lot longer than it used to even 3 years ago. So we're building that into our overall schedule right now, but and we'll have ongoing kind of discussions with them during the design process as well. Communication decision-making structures. So this is our structure that we'll be using throughout the project. So again, the school board, you guys are the ultimate decision makers. That doesn't necessarily mean you're doing the legwork. Leadership and oversight, they will really be doing most of the legwork of this process. Now that doesn't mean they're not relying on the two entities below them, but as we go through design and even construction, they'll be making recommendations on change orders, scope changes, approval of design, those kinds of things. Now the core group, they'll do a lot of the design work for this effort, and the users under them will provide the input to the core group so that we have a good handle that everyone's been talked to, all the departments are represented well in the design, and that we've got all the information we need for a functioning building at the end of this process. The next couple slides are taken out of our first core planning group. So we'll present it again. They're really focused on the process here, planning process. So it's reiterating kind of that structure you just saw, just in a little bit different formats. But they're, again, the big thing is this is the why that justifies the what. So we're going to go through quite a few meetings where we push criteria and build criteria for what the building needs to do and accomplish. And as we get towards the end of design, that building should meet every one of those as we develop those. Again, as I just mentioned, defining the criteria. So actually our next meeting, core planning group number 3, we'll be taking a download of what people saw on the tours, which I'll get to in a little bit here, as well as defining those criteria based on, number 1, what we saw on the tours, number 2, what people have envisioned for years in anticipation of this project. And then I spoke about user groups, so that we won't get into this until hopefully school is in session and teachers are back on site. It makes it a little easier. But again, we'll meet with those groups so that we get every one of these categories, and there may even be more that we haven't identified. We're getting that input and how it affects each room. I mean, we're getting down to where's the light fixture, where are the outlets, how many data outlets do we have, how much casework, you know, those kinds of details that go into the design. So, and then last one, criteria are objective and commitment is subjective. So we've got a couple things that have already been identified. These are going to grow as we get into the meeting number 3. And then you may recognize this diagram. I believe this was in the review and comment with the rough site diagram. So this is an initial, I'll just preface this, that this is the initial building diagram. This is, your building's not going to look anything like this. We're going to we gonna be done? Now, that's neither good nor bad, but we needed something, one, to put a budget to, one, understand what we were gonna program to, and two, just give the voters the idea of how big is this thing when we're adding on to the building. So, the next slide, we've already started investigating some other ideas, whether or not it goes north and we try to possibly preserve the existing field there and do improvements to that, or does it allow for better circulation through the site? Now, any one of these moves is going to affect something on the site, whether it be the existing track and field, whether it be the baseball fields to the north. We know that, so we'll be either recreating or rebuilding some of the things on site. But ultimately, the building needs to work, it needs to function, one, for visitors coming to the building so that you have a secure entrance during the school day, and two, for students, the mass influx and release of students coming to the building, hopefully someday when we're through COVID. So core planning group number 2 was the tours. So we went to 3 sites, Sartell High School, Tech High School in St. Cloud, and Hutchinson High School. These all 3 have been built within the last 3 years. I think Sartell was open for its first full year last year. So it's a fairly large building. Here's quite a few images that we took through the building, and there are some people in the room that were on the tours. I don't know if you guys want to add anything or comment as we go through here, but again, the idea of the tours was to not necessarily see things that we want to copy, but just see things and be able to react to them at the next meeting of what did we like, what didn't we like, how was the building organized, because we actually unintentionally picked 3 buildings that are organized completely different from one another, especially in terms of how the entry works. They all have secure entries, but just how you enter the building and what you're released into right away, whether that be the commons or a community room, some other things, and just how even the gyms and the educational spaces are separated was pretty much different in every one of the buildings. So I think we got a good mix for the group to react to next Tuesday when we meet again. So this was St. Cloud Tech High School. Again, this has been, I think, a couple years now open. And then a couple images from that. And then Hutchinson High School. And this one's probably been open the longest of the 3. And this one's a little unique in the fact that this was the only one that was technically a major renovation, major addition. So they tore down probably almost 75% of their existing building and built around some existing portions that they wanted to keep. So it gave you a good mix of, not that we're adding on to an old building, but again, we're adding on to a building, and how is that going to affect some of the decisions we make. So overall schedule, we're planning on getting out to bid next spring, or this upcoming spring, I should say. Whether that be February or March is highly dependent on how fast the core group makes decisions. Now, that being said, we're not going to force the design through. We're going to let the core group do their job. So if we feel that the schematic design phase here, in which we'd be bringing a recommendation back to you guys on August 27th, it takes that long, it'll take that long. If it doesn't take that long, by all means, we'll ask to possibly accelerate that and ask for a special board meeting to maybe approve and get a jump on design development. But we do have all the phases planned out here and still get out for spring bidding, which is good. And then I think we've got a plentiful schedule for construction. And in terms of how things get layered into that construction, we haven't really gotten into that yet until we learn kind of what the soil borings are telling us. And 2, in a couple meetings, we'll have a pretty good idea how the building's going to lay on the site. That'll start dictating a lot of the phasing. So what's next? As I mentioned, next Tuesday, we have core group meeting number 3. So we're going to do a tour download, and we're going to start developing those criteria that are going to influence the design. And then in the afternoons of each of those meetings, we have leadership and oversight. So they'll get a download and any other decisions that we possibly need to make in terms of the design process. Then in July, again, we'll finalize criteria, hopefully, and work on option development. Now, whether we have the fully cooked options at that point, yet to be seen, but we'll have options that Wold will be able to start moving pieces around and see what that means to the overall design. And then on the 28th, but basically we're looking for basically at about an 85% development of that plan, that bubble diagram. So at the end of SD, we'll have a diagram. It may not have doors and windows, but that relationship bubble that we had in the review and comment, that'll be fully cooked so that we kind of know how the building is going to lay out on the site. We'll also have an understanding of how all the resources, whether that be student parking, visitor parking, the bus drop off for the site, how that all works. So got a lot of work to do this summer, but it's fun work, and we appreciate the efforts of those that have volunteered to be on it. Any questions?
I have one.
Yeah.
I've heard pros and cons of, bidding January, February is good, March, April's good. Is one better than the other?
I wouldn't say one's better than other. We, as a group, ICS monitors bidding climate pretty regularly. We are at a point now where we're bidding stuff at least every month. So, and we're talking to contractors constantly. So they're either calling us and asking us what they have, or we're reaching out to see, if we're looking at bidding this, are you going to be at the bid table to actually put a number to it? So it's something we constantly monitor. Earlier spring, I would say, is better. As you get further into the later in the spring, you can run into issues. However, our project is a 2-year project. Now there are some benefits to that as well. So we'll weigh that as we get further into it. And even if we bid later, there's things we can do right off the bat with site work. There will be construction happening in some regards, whether it's building or site.
Okay. Yeah.
How in depth do you guys go for the parking and the road? You talked earlier about, numbers of vehicles and needing that information. With that 9th Street going out to Highway 65, and that became this past year 60 miles an hour. My kids this spring witnessed the fatality of a motorcycle accident at that intersection after they left
Practice.
your practice. So I'm really concerned about high school kids coming out onto that highway. Is there some talk, at least originally, about maybe possibly the high school parking lot being off of the county road versus the city's road to break up that flow of traffic?
All those things will be looked at. We really need the traffic engineer to kind of do their work initially.
Yep.
Get some of that data, just even with existing traffic.
But will the state, could you have the state involved in that too, possibly?
So yes,
Okay.
the answer to all that is yes.
Okay.
So with MnDOT though, that is at least, I would say, a 2-year process.
I know, that's right.
So there may be aspects of this, regardless of how we implement the building, that we could possibly be working with MnDOT a year afterwards just to see what those improvements are going to be.
I was in law enforcement for
Sure.
several years, so yes, I understand that at least 2 years with the state.
I mean, for instance, we're working up in St. Francis. They had that fatality, or not fatality, those 2 girls got hit at that intersection. We're still working with MnDOT to try to come up with a solution. They haven't landed on something, so it can take a while.
But you're gonna look
but-
really strongly at that.
Yep.
Okay, thank
We'll
you.
definitely take that into consideration, as well as the county road that's off to
Yep.
the other side.
Thanks.
Yep. Any other questions?
Doesn't look like it tonight, Chris, so thank you for the update. And I think next then, we are going to hear from Troy regarding some fun.
I have an idea.
Possibilities. Here we go, always.
I know, I have a comment. I shouldn't assume, but
Yeah.
I don't coach pool. Oh my goodness. There's another one. Oh.
over our existing track.
Right now, that is, yeah.
So this would be related to raising money for the turf on the football field. Just for anybody that may not know, or is pretty much aware. Right.
I never like to see an opportunity go without at least throwing a good pitch at it. So we've had discussions, I've talked to, we had a meeting with ICS early this week or last week, I can't remember what it was, trying to figure out what's in the budget, what is going on up there, where the field is gonna be, how it's gonna be, and all that kind of stuff. And in the discussions with them, it came down to there's a $400,000 gap for us to have turf. What they would have to do to put a grass field in up there, they have already in there. In order, because if they're gonna have to move that one field or whatever they had to do. So that's already in there. The additional would be the 400,000 to put turf up there on that field. And the time to put turf in is when you're doing a new field, because it's just that the cost is already, you're eating up most of your cost just getting the site work prepped. And then it's the turf over the top. So that's why I was looking at doing it now as opposed to later. Another reason that turf would be so much more beneficial is the use. We can actually use that field multiple times a day, after day, after day, FI-EDs, recesses, practices, games, whatever it is, that field can be used constantly. So we would be gaining basically 2 fields with that one field. Because all varsity practices would be on that field, as well as all varsity games, JV games, ninth grade games. But we are able to practice on the same field that we play on. We don't ever have to worry about the field out here that we have, or if we put a grass field in and we put a new grass field in, no one can be on that competition field unless we're having a competition.
Right.
It just doesn't work. So you're gonna have to put in a competition field up there at some point, plus you're gonna have to put in practice field up there, plus, so now, in my opinion, now's the time to look at doing this. And so as I was talking with ICS, they're working with Grand Rapids High School right now. Grand Rapids High School is in the process of putting in a new turf field. Their community raised something like $700,000 in order to get the put in. So they came up with some ideas, and that's why you have that trifold there and stuff like that. But basically what I need to do and why I'm here today is this is something that I have to get going on relatively fast. Because we have a drop dead date when ICS is gonna say, we have to put this out for bids. Are we doing turf or are we doing grass? What it's gonna look like and stuff like that. So I have to, come here and see if the board is willing to support or get on, along with us. So the second page there is the reason that basically here is to get permission. Being as this is going to be a school project on school property, both the school board and the superintendent need to be highly supportive of this project, as it is, it's something that I just can't be, hey, this is what I want to do. I need the school board and superintendent, incoming superintendent to be behind. So that's kind of why I'm here. And in order to start this, I have to start fundraising to get to this $400,000 goal by certain date, X being, I've had, as soon as November 1st, we could be putting stuff out there and we have to have stuff ready. So I need to be able to move on this faster than wait until August or September or something like that to start going. So what we'd be doing is putting together a fundraising team. Fundraising team would involve, it'd be a committee, myself as a head football coach, the athletic director, and then some other, we find other people that are willing. I'd like to have a board member that would be willing to, if this is something you want to do and be involved in, be great to have a board member to be advising us as we're doing it as a liaison, especially as a liaison and a member for that. And then we'd set up, the positions, co-chairs, treasurer, recorder, all that stuff, get the whole committee set up. Start having our weekly meetings, bi-weekly meetings, setting our goals and doing all that stuff. Now, again, all this stuff is all, yeah, we could do this, we could do that, we could do that. But I don't have anything in concrete for you today on what we can do and what we can't, or what we will do. Because if you're not willing to, let us go out and do this, then there's really no sense in us coming up with exact plans and how we can operate this and stuff like that. But, the next page kind of showed how Grand Rapids did it with their fundraising and major field sponsors, major donors, minor donors, and corporate entities and stuff like that. They used a 3 years to pay because they had a foundation set up. But any of their big donors that actually were getting leasing advertising space, they had to come up with the money at the beginning. They didn't have the 3-year window to get their donations in and stuff like that. So, and again, this is just what they had done, and that's what I'm using. I have no idea what this committee will come up with and say how we can do this or what we are doing. I have my own ideas, but it isn't just me. It will be a committee of people.
The monitor at the end of Main Street, and we just started at $1. It's been a while since I've seen one of those visuals.
But we need to actively let our community know what we're doing. We need to be out there PRing this. We need to be, this is a big thing. This is a good thing. And this isn't something we should run away from or hide from or try to not be public about. This is a great thing for this community. If we can pull this off. So, or when we pull this off, it'll be a great thing for the community. The trifolds I handed out, but I also have them just on their flat surfaces in your packet there. This just kind of showed, I wanted to show this over on the right hand side of that first one. It shows what Grand Rapids used for their levels of contributions. So they had $100,000, they was the champions. They ended up getting a corner of the field with their name on that for 10 years for their $100,000. I think they were using $100,000 was they sold their corners for. No, yeah, it was $100,000 they sold the corners for. So this kind of shows, what some different ideas that we have and stuff like that. Now, and the reason I had to include the trifold is we would be getting trifolds put together, we'd be getting donation cards put together, we're going to be have to do all that stuff because it's going to be, a professionally run program to raise this money.
One thing that really impressed me when we talked to this gentleman, and it was about noon on Monday, that if you take a look at the middle of this, you'll see that the number of current uses and the amount of time that a regular grass field can be used, and the number of uses that those individual schools use. And then if you take a look at the right side, you'll see that how that season is lengthened out because of the darker color, melts the snow faster, because of the drainage, because there's no downtime. These fields are set to take 2.5 inches of rain an hour. They're mostly sand underneath there, and then vented besides, or plumbed so that the water goes out of there. So you can see the number of uses if you get down in there, the Brainerd Esco, the number of athletes that they serve versus the number of pieces. And then he also talked about the safety piece that goes along with the turf field versus the grass field. The number of injuries on a turf field over time with these additional uses actually has less injuries than the grass field has with the smaller number of injuries that they, or a smaller number of uses that they have. So there's really a lot of benefit to be gained for the district by going to a turf field.
Right, what involvement would the Booster Club have in this process?
I would probably be going to them to pull somebody from their board onto our committee to but it would be separate from,
It would just, I mean, I think this would be in their alley, and I think you should definitely include them.
Absolutely.
I think they'd be excited to get involved in it.
yes.
And they already have contacts with businesses and.
Yes, they already have all of that. So, I'm not doing this to compete with the Booster Club. I'm doing this.
Well, that's the other piece too, is to work synergistically with them so you're not competing with them.
Absolutely. But it is something, and it's a dollar amount that is so much higher than what that
In the past.
it has to be.
Yeah, but they may be just as excited to reach this new.
Absolutely. Again, this is all.
Yep, just coming right in. And I think most of us are just like you going, well, this is really cool. What can we do?
Yeah, so, and then the last is just the part of that trifold there that kind of shows, now it's called Noble, they call theirs Noble Hall Field Improvement Project. This one here I would call Vermont Ice Field Improvement Project. The field may be moved, but any field the varsity football team plays on for Mora as a home field is Vermont Ice Field. So that name will go with this field. And so that, it would be a Burlap Ice Field Improvement Project, and we would be up and running to improve the field.
Is there some way to multi-use this? I see in the picture of Noble House, a soccer.
Absolutely.
So can it be designed to use for multiple uses or any type of sports?
Yeah,
In the future?
That's
Yes.
okay. Sure, yeah.
Yeah, and they,
Because I don't know if a soccer field's the same size as a football field, I have no idea. But I just want to
It's
make
actually wider.
So I
Depending on your track, the state of Minnesota really doesn't set. They give you a minimum and a maximum. And wider is always better for soccer, but it all depends on what your track is, if you have a track around.
Okay, so, because I would just like it to be multi-use.
absolutely, and I do too.
I'm thinking of 40 years down the line, so.
The softball coach has already talked to me about, he will be able to go out there in the spring, have 2 fields set up for practicing before any chance of getting out on the actual grass field with the wetness and stuff like that. So, yeah, it's.
And that's all I care about.
Eds, it's for recesses, it's for youth soccer. I know they have youth soccer in the town, it's be youth flag football up there. I mean, we will have the lights there with it, so I mean, we could have stuff going on until 9 PM,
And specifically there at Grand Rapids, they have the soccer, but they also have lacrosse.
They have lacrosse,
And they also
yes.
have competitive marching band.
Perfect.
And all of those.
That's all I care about is that it's multi-use.
So on a day that there is junior high games, you will have varsity practice at the same time.
Junior high has a different game field.
Oh, because you mentioned junior high games, so I was trying to.
Junior varsity.
Junior varsity,
Oh,
9th grade.
Maybe I
The
misunderstood.
9th grade JV varsity play their home games on the field. But we
yeah.
could use it at times.
Well, right,
We
but-
could schedule them in there to,
Yeah, I get
give
that.
the 7th and 8th graders a chance to play on the.
Yeah.
on-
Under the lights.
You
Under lights.
probably said junior varsity and I heard
Yeah.
junior high, so.
I sure am in favor of doing something like this if we could multi-purpose it. It's just not a football field.
I
Sorry.
don't know the ideas and,
Yeah.
Definitely
safety to
eliminates the need for
multiple use.
other spaces.
Now, this last one I kind of threw on there, because it kind of blew it up a little bit so you could see. Those ad logos that they have in the corners, I can set the price for those. So as we go and talk to community members and companies and stuff like that, if we come and then we come up, the committee comes up with a price for them, that would be, they'd be leasing that piece of property basically to advertise on for 10 years. But it's gonna come with a good sized check. And then they own that's pretty good size. It's like 15 yards long by 10 yards wide or whatever.
Professional fundraisers said, just think of the side of a semi truck. That's the size of where it says ad logo.
So how many of those do you sell?
I could sell 4, I could sell 2, I could sell 1,
But as many as 4?
as many as 4
Okay.
at that size, yes.
And he suggested that the home field side would have a higher price tag than the visitor side. But that's a decision that you have to make as to whether that's permissible or not, and then at what rate, or how many of those would be permissible.
And maybe some parameters on what kind of advertising we do.
Yes, and that's, I'm sorry if I didn't get it on the first.
It does have to meet
Minnesota State High School League rules.
Okay.
Yep.
No alcohol, no tobacco, no.
Yeah.
all those things.
Yeah, all state high school league rules and district rules need to be followed for advertising. And, but it also gives those donors, I shouldn't call them donors, if they're paying for that space, they can write that whole thing off as a expense for advertising, as opposed to donating and then waiting for the tax implications to come out and stuff like that.
But as opposed to a lease, it'd be a prepaid lease. We
Prepaid lease.
paid the funds at the time we did that. work.
Yes.
Well, the beauty of it, he suggested is that you do it for 10 years, so that these fields are guaranteed for 8. He said you can't wear them out in 12, but in 10 you resell your advertising, and now you have your money to put new turf on and when it's time. So there's a real benefit to that as well.
Solid.
It's a good financial plan.
Yeah, they are guaranteed for 8 years nationwide. Northern climates get longer use out of them because the biggest thing that hurts these fields is sunlight. So since we have snow cover for X number of months, that cuts down on the actual deterioration of the field. So typically in Minnesota, the turf fields have been getting 12 years out of them.
12, I think I know one that might be pushing 15 now.
Yeah. When we went down and practiced at Sasaga Lakes 3 years ago on their turf field, they were at the end, but they were over 10 years when we were down there. I don't know if they put in new yet.
They're actually replacing it next year.
Okay, so, yeah.
Planning for replacement next year.
So, so that there again, that revenue stream could still be there. And if somebody, you know, if somebody, I shouldn't say it that way, but let's say somebody changes their name after they put a spot here, we would be able to replace that at their expense. But I think they said it was like $6,000 to tear that out and put in a new, but it can be weaved right in to that.
Because it's actually part of the turf, it's permanent.
Yeah. Yeah.
So why are you looking at me?
Or they can have an opportunity to do it again.
Who would have thought?
Who would have done
But yeah, but after that, you know, at that 10-year mark, if our field's still good, we can get new ones in there. If they decided not to re-up or whatever that might be. But, so I guess what I'm basically looking for is permission to stand up a committee to go forward and hit our goal and put turf field in Mora.
Sound like if anybody could get it done, you can, so.
Yeah, thanks for the
I'd like your
enthusiasm.
initiative, and I know there'd be a lot of excited people. And hopefully we've got some alumni with some money nowadays.
Hopefully.
They would be.
Not looking at me, but maybe Ethan.
Well, thank you, because you have really infused some energy into the program too, and I think that that's not going to hurt. But not too many people are aware of more state football right now. So. But you're looking for a motion.
I make a motion to go crazy with this.
I'll second.
Motion by Bob Woods, second by Tammy, that Troy move ahead with the fundraising project for the turf field and report back periodically and keep us updated.
And with that, I would like to entertain a board member to, Scott, you would?
I would be certainly willing to.
All right.
Awesome.
Volunteer.
Anybody else wants to be on?
Okay, we have the committee has.
Has started.
Just for clarification, turf
multi-purpose field?
Well, it's, the material's turf, but it will be a multi-purpose,
Correct.
Just,
so.
Yeah, is a football field which is strictly usable for.
Yeah.
that's all I care about, is
Yep.
that it's reflected.
Yeah, we're the same.
Clearly.
Scott, I'd like to join you.
Sure.
And I do think I mean, everybody on this board has an interest in this and avenues of approach for this.
Absolutely, so please, don't
I
be
was just
shy.
gonna say, don't forget that you can lean on any of us. so.
Yeah, and but I do appreciate it to you,
Yeah.
those that, there's a lot of work to do.
Yeah, I just really like the color of your shirt, and funny, I kind of brought that up before too, for the field, but, which answers certain things too, about having it stand out to be something specific to us.
It's gonna be done, it's gonna be done right.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
All right, well, we have a motion, any further discussion? Not all in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously, thank you, Troy, and again, thank you, Chris. Okay, consent agenda, any requests to remove any items? Maybe I just suggest we pull under I, annual renewals, the renewal with MREA, simply because we have an option there of a 1 year or 2 year fee. So let's pull that. That motion separate discussion.
Need a second to that, or is that just a?
I'm just requesting to have it pulled, I think it's motion. Otherwise, motion to approve the rest of the consent agenda. That motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Ethan, second by Scott. Any discussion? We will acknowledge and accept the gifts and donations from me. Those are Essential Energy, $4,500 for the scholarship fund. Essential Energy, $300 toward graduation. Number there from the Mora Education Foundation, $97.71 for a mini grant. $3,333 for Imagination Library. $846.68 for the weight room tablets, and $474.05 for a Corral grant. I'm assuming that's the coffee shop. Yes. Very nice. So with thanks for those. And if there's no further discussion, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. So then, along with the other annual membership renewals, MREA, a few years ago, I can't remember how long we've been members now, but we decided we would do it on a trial basis, or we would join, and I think we've been realizing some benefits from it. But given that we're also in transition with superintendents, it would give Dan an opportunity to weigh in after a year, and just kind of monitor or reevaluate that, or we can renew for 2 years.
And it's really retiring though, what, this summer, is that his summer?
That's right, yeah.
We'll have a new executive director.
Yeah, that's.
I just looked at the renewal
Yeah.
bill invoice, and he's still signed it, so I don't know who the new one is, and
Yeah.
if they've hired, I don't
Yeah.
remember. So it really isn't a huge deal, but what's your pleasure? We could go either way.
Dan, do you have an opinion on it?
Yeah, I'm very familiar with MREA. They have some good benefits, especially like communication. They boil down a lot of the COVID stuff and the distance learning. I don't know what you think, Craig. Would you
And
agree with
Brenda
that?
just referred to a number of her things with her presentation. That's where she got her information from. Brenda's done a wonderful job with the organization in the past 8 years that she's been there or so. And so I think it's worth moving forward with. But Karen had mentioned that with 1 or 2 years, what I recommended, and with the new director, you may want to check that out. I didn't have a chance to talk with Dan about it, and so I think it would be, at least for the first year, would definitely be the way to move forward.
By doing 2, we don't have say $250. Could also go up next year, but like I said, I think in the big picture.
Have you guys been to the conference?
No.
Okay. I've been there once. They run a pretty good
They're
conference.
always held on a Monday, which is, are they Sunday evening Monday or something like that?
Can't remember.
Whatever, but, no, I haven't gone.
We've only been a member for just a few years.
Okay.
Yeah, is it 3 or 4? Time goes fast, so.
It feels like it was yesterday, we were just sitting in this room, meeting with them and talking about
Right.
their benefits and.
Sam Walseth is still there. He was there previously, and he'll continue in his role.
I'd make a motion for a 1-year renewal.
All right, we have a motion for a 1-year renewal, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, motion by Ethan, second by Bob Jensen. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. All right, next item is consider adoption of a resolution to enter into an agreement with, the state of Minnesota, SKU Board of Trustees, St. Cloud.
All the way or not?
No,
Okay.
just
Sorry.
the MREA.
Okay.
I probably wasn't clear, I was just telling you to find it.
No, I heard you say all the way, so.
And she gave a reason for it, the 2 options.
Yep.
But
Sorry.
the motion was only on MREA.
Okay.
so, yeah. Okay, so, basically approve of a resolution to enter into an agreement with, St. Cloud State University for providing supervisory services for students.
Yep, this is a 5-year renewal.
5-year.
So moved. Second.
Motion by Scott, second by Bob Woods. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. All right, then, item 10, consider approval of amended memorandum of understanding, QCOM, between Education Minnesota, Mora Local 1802, and Mora School District for July 1, 2020 through June 30th, 2022. This is also done annually. I did ask Craig about changes to it other than needing to be updated for the coming year. And he said that the stipend for the 2 coordinators had changed from the last MOU.
Yep, and that's a recommendation from the QCOM committee.
Okay.
The increase that from, I believe it was 7,500 each to 10,000 each. But that money doesn't come out of the operating budget, that's strictly out of the QCOM budget, which is a separate budget.
So, somebody please make a motion. Okay,
I'll second.
motion by Bob Jensen, second by Tammy. Further discussion? All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. And we have Association of Mora Administrators Agreement for 2019 to 2021. And then need a motion to approve that contract.
I'll make a motion to approve the contract.
Second.
Motion by Bob Woods, second by Scott. Any further discussion?
I just want to add to that it was a great, professional, good discussion with the interest of all parties involved, hard on the table negotiation that I was felt very good to be a part of, and very proud and thankful for the administrators we have.
Yes. I agree, and thank you for serving and reporting back on that, and that's always good to hear, but yes, we appreciate our administrators for sure.
Could I ask Scott to kind of review it, that it was a 2-and-2 contract, and the biggest thing was the adding of, towards construction costs.
Yeah.
And I can't remember the
Yeah, I was
numbers,
just
you're
gonna
good at
say-
it, you're good at it.
Well, if you don't, Nick is here, you know, they say, yeah, it was basically a 2-and-2, we totaled up with 60 hours total for any year that there is a construction project. Well, actually, we actually did it as a percentage based on, for days up to, I mean, if it was a $10 million project or 60 million, that's where the, 1 day per million of anything over 10, if I remember right. But then there was also caps on no more than three, help me out, there was
For this
Yeah.
one particular one, it would be for a $62 million project, would
Yeah.
be 62 days.
Yes,
The
62
62
days.
days then would be divided by the administrators involved. That's not 62 each, it's 62 total. So
It's a
then,
cap of
over
15.
the time frame, the team, the administrative team would come with a recommendation for the superintendent and the administrative negotiators of what their recommendation would be, so it'd be a total of 62. So such as up at that building, Brent will be very involved. And I think there's a 15 max
Per individual.
And then the elementary principals may have some input on that, so they would have some days, buildings and grounds, activities director, not to exceed 62 days.
Thank you. Yep. Perfect.
Okay. Anything else? We didn't vote, did we?
No.
All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes unanimously. Consider approval of the Mora Public Schools bus driver agreement for 2020 to 2022. And
Make that motion.
thank you, Scott. Motion by Scott, second by Ethan. Further discussion?
Again, a great group to.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's,
But,
One and done, or did we have 2 meetings this
It
time?
was one and
I want to say one and done.
It was pretty weird, it was all Zoom.
Yeah.
The board members were here and the bus drivers all Zoomed in.
Yeah.
And so they didn't have the opportunity necessarily to talk among themselves, they were Zoomed in. We tried to take breaks and do things like we normally would, but
Yeah.
we were done within a couple of hours.
And specifically with that group, they were impressive at how they looked out for one another. Not necessarily for the highest earners, but they were looking out for the people that were working, and that it was another impressive group to work
Yep.
with. Very much appreciated.
And Karen, I will be abstaining because I rarely work, but I do work in there once in a while.
I did really.
Okay.
Well, thanks for doing that.
Understanding that? So, with that, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. And that motion passes with 5 in favor, 0 opposed, and 1 abstention. Okay, item 13. Consider adoption of resolution establishing dates for filing affidavits of candidacy and notice the filing dates for the election to the school board. This will be published soon. As you probably read in your packet, action is not required, but we typically do take action to adopt. It's
No.
harmless.
Next.
Are you gonna pose? Next
I'm
item?
gonna pose it.
All right,
We're
would
good.
somebody please make a motion and we'll move on.
move approval.
Second.
Motion by Ethan, second by Bob Jensen. Discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. All right, brings us to the adopted budget for fiscal year 2020 and 21. Hey, Tammy, turn it over to Craig and you. You have it, or I don't know, did you want to give this up?
Well, I gave you handouts on some of the things that have changed from our preliminary budget in March. And, you know, there wasn't a ton of changes. We had some additional revenue, we had some additional expenditures. In that top right-hand corner of the budget summary, you'll see that's our operating funds, our Fund 1, our general fund, Fund 3, our transportation, and Fund 5, our operating and LTFM fund. So that stayed relatively similar to what we had in March, was with a projected spend down of the budget of initially in March it was 267, and now we're at 253,000, which is a planned spend down to get us more in line with what our fund balance policy is.
The anticipated fund balance for the end of this current year will be at about 22 to 22.5%. And this brings us down to 20% at the end of next year. So that's what the goal was. And so we've been trying to stay between that 18 and 22%. So we're projecting with this budget, we'll be at 20% next year.
Our food service fund, not a lot of changes, just projected our revenue in line of more of what we've seen the past 3 years, and then have some additional expenditures, capital expenditures. Our community ed fund, we did, this fiscal year, we had added an additional early childhood teacher and para because we had the space available and the numbers were up. This upcoming year, that's not the case, so we did choose to cut that additional teacher and para, which puts us more at a balanced budget for fiscal '21.
And the reason being space, or did the numbers also reflect the?
Space and numbers.
I think the majority of it is space. We had taken an additional space since there was an elementary room that was available and opened it up, and then we were able to fill it with our childhood students. But now we need that elementary for our elementary students, and so that's why the reduction.
Our construction fund, Fund 6, here we have not updated with our additional revenue coming in or our projected expenditures. As soon as we get those draw schedules, we'll be updating that on the January revised budget. Right now, we're just recognizing that revenue from the First Light Orwellia lease payment. And then we have our debt service fund, which is just our revenues that we're bringing in to pay those current bonds. Did you have any questions on any of the updates?
Any questions, or I go to the finance committee just met, and if anybody wants to elaborate on anything or provide any insights?
This is exactly what we reviewed. The budget total was actually approved from the preliminary, so it's I think it's good news. So, I think there's better information now, and it'll be changed halfway through the year.
Yeah, as you recall, this is our second in our 3 budget cycle, and we'll do another revised one. Tammy and Dan will do a revised one in January, February. We did give the finance committee a couple of options on some things we could do, and based on the flexibility we feel we need with the unknowns coming up for the year, we could put their recommendation, build that into this budget as well.
And just to elaborate on that, the recommendations come as very fiscally conservative and well thought out recommendations on long-term use of money so that we can continue to have budgets that look like this rather than getting ourselves in any kind of trouble. So thank you, and kudos to you guys for doing a great job again with this.
Thank you. Well, thanks Tim, thank you Craig, maybe motion.
Second.
Okay, motion by Ethan, second by Tammy. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion is passed unanimously. Okay, we will now have an update on the LTFM 10-year plan. Consider approval of that. And is Chip here?
Chip is unavailable this evening, and so Tammy will address that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, with the information that I know from Chip, I'll go through this. So currently, our current year, we don't have all the invoices in for the projects that we've done this year for LTFM. So we're still waiting on those to close out the year, but we will have some projects that are deferred to future years. So those funds just flow through to the next year for LTFM projects. And so Chip went through and did our 10-year expenditure plan. And we have for FY21 approximately $84,000 planned for health and safety projects and $560,000 for deferred capital expense projects. And then the revenue that is planned to come in for FY21 is about 669,000. Of that, 298 is levy, and 370 would be from state aid. So we have approximately the same amount of expense going out as revenue coming in for FY '21. As we do get out further in planning this 10-year plan in fiscal 2024, we'll see our revenue drop as we take off the high school and add in a new addition.
And then it starts going back up again right away after years. Okay, any questions for Tim? Questions regarding the 10-year plan? All right, somebody motion to approve.
So moved.
Motion by Bob, second. Second by Scott. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much, Tammy. Appreciate it.
He's not done yet.
Oh, okay. Consider approval to
A few more.
seek. Are we on the technology? Okay. For funding from First Citizens Bank for 2 new technology loans. Go ahead, Tammy.
So we have some additional technology loans. The first one being for some STEM lab computers, iPad Airs, MacBook Airs, and Chromebooks for student devices. And that would be on the 4-year loan. And then the 7-year loan is for items that have a longer life, and those are for cameras and phone equipment. So we have that one projected on a 7-year plan. And those, we did get in the lowest rates from First Citizens.
If you recall, we originally, when we talked about this, we were going to update our technology on a regular basis so that we didn't get into that old and junk type mode. And we started out the first year, we went with a leasing company that charged us more like 4.5% or something like that. And talking with the local banks, they said we can do better than that at the time. So we did the 1-year lease piece, and then we jumped in and were able to go out, and we have solicit bids from all 3 of the local financials. And these were the best interest rates that we got, so very reflective of the current times.
Do we just sell, or how does that work when we lose this cycle?
That equipment comes back in, and then Shane sells it back or bundles it back and finds basically a salvage company that takes them. So again, we're much further ahead doing it this way than we would be just to lease the company and then do the leasing at the 4.5% and then just send the equipment back. Right.
Okay, so we need a motion to approve. One motion I think is sufficient, right?
So, second.
Motion by Scott, second by Bob Jensen. Any further discussion? So this is a motion on the first loan for 48 months, 4 years, and then the second one also 7 years. So any further discussion? All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion passes unanimously. To talk about the IOWA to Tammy, or are you done?
Well, she's going to stick around because she's here for a couple more financial items we have.
Yeah,
coming.
so.
The next 3 items are to get Dan in and set up as the Iowa, the identified official with authority through the Department of Education secure site. I've been doing that. Well, when I started, we had the individual from MDE that did that. We turned all the stuff in and they did it. And then through their department cuts, they cut some of those positions and they dumped it back on the districts. And so then it's recommended that the superintendent is the individual with authority, and that can be delegated to another district member if the superintendent chooses to. So we do need a motion and action in the minutes that we can send in when we shift over on July 1st to Dan, the identified
This was done annually anyway, right? But not
Yeah, we
typically
generally do it in the
June.
January meeting,
Okay.
where you reauthorize that in the organizational meeting. But since we're having a transfer here, we can do it now.
Okay.
So moved.
Second?
Motion by Bob Jensen, second by Tammy. Discussion, further discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. And then item 18 is to consider approval to add Dan Voce as the authorized signer to accounts at Neighborhood National Bank. Motion.
So moved. Second.
Motion by Bob Woods, second by Ethan. Discussion.
Question, do we need to tweak that to remove, okay, I don't know, I'm thinking, yeah.
Yep,
This, going back to that banking day, I'm just going to clarify that, you know.
To remove.
Yeah, to add Dan Voce as signer and to remove
Yes.
Craig Schultz as signer. That way it covers you and gives them clear direction.
No overlap.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Is
we
that-
can,
I'm looking at
I don't
Tammy,
think
so-
that's- I don't think it's necessary.
Yeah.
Because
We
the
have-
signature cards will be redone
Yeah.
with Tammy and Dan on the signature cards, and I won't be on the next one. But if you want to include that in the motion, we certainly can.
We had talked about putting it on the July one as well, just to
Oh,
make
okay.
sure that we got everything
Oh,
transferred with
sure.
the signature cards,
Yep.
in case something were to come up and we needed a signer.
perfect. So then we'll leave it, the motion as is
Yeah.
right now to add Dan. And thank you.
Yep.
Got it handled, so.
Good questions.
Yeah, good question. Further discussion? All right, so all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. And then we will do the same for authorizing Dan as a signer on the accounts at First Citizens Bank as of July 1, 2020.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Scott, second by Ethan. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes unanimously. Okay, item 20, consider approval of professional services as per Construction Support and Oversight LLC proposal. As you have seen, it's in your packet, Rick sent the proposal out to us regarding professional services as we begin construction of the high school, and I guess we should open it for discussion, or if somebody would like to make a motion of some kind to put it on the table for
I'll make a
discussion.
motion to approve. I'll second.
Motion by Bob Woods, second by Ethan. Discussion.
Sure.
Bob?
Just bringing it up, and I really appreciate the offer and stuff. I really honestly do. But I do have some concerns. I sat on a state regulatory board several years ago. And we talked about, I was on the executive committee, and we talked about having the executive director stay over for a while. And the North Memorial VP pulled me aside and said, he explained to me that sometimes that can be a kiss of death for a new person coming in. And it would be his recommendation, and several people, and he named some, I can't remember, that was their recommendation not to do something like that. And I realize this is a little bit different, but I had that thought. I also, Craig's done a fantastic job for the district and stuff, but I hate to put this on Dan, but have you had some thought about all this and
Feel
what-
free, Dan. We did meet with Dan.
Yeah.
Actually,
Yeah.
Ethan and I met with Dan.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I can
Dan,
speak- I can
absolutely,
speak
you
to that.
have input if you would like.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the question. I think it's a fair, well, maybe it's not a question, a fair thought. And, one of the things that we had we had talked about, Craig and I had talked about it too. And, you know, I've worked with Craig for what, it seems like a couple months now, huh, Craig? Every week. And, you know, I don't see a concern on my behalf of Craig, you know, overstepping his bounds. I see Craig as a resource and a person of experience and knowledge and history of Mora that I don't bring with me. You know, whatever the school board would think, and we talked about this too, but I think it would be almost like an insurance type of a thing that, you know, you have another set of eyes and another set of experience of looking at that. And, you know, looking at the proposal, there's always an out as well for the board. If it doesn't seem to be working, then it would be that. But I don't anticipate that happening. I think, like I said, we worked for a couple months and Craig has been nothing but trying to help me and making sure that I know that he's not going to be in my way, but he'll be on the sidelines if I need his support and help. So that's my thoughts on that.
Just from, what is this? Is this a construction? Is this a mentoring? Is this all of the above? Or, I'm just curious. I'd like to get a better idea if somebody asked me, what is this for?
Okay. With hiring Dan as a new superintendent and passing the bond election of $62 million, and as Dan is gaining experience in learning how to be a superintendent, with the COVID piece coming up for next year and the amount of management that's going to take, I'm putting out an offer to assist with that. I had to have a very thorough discussion with my wife of what that would and wouldn't be as well. It's not because I want to stick around. It's because I've talked with and been asked by a number of staff members to do that. And so I guess I work with Tammy very directly, and with a new auditor coming in, with a new payroll clerk coming in, with a new superintendent coming in. I work with Kelly on a regular basis, and I only have 3 days left, so if you guys have anything you want to say for or against, feel free to do so. But there are a number of concerns within the district as we move forward.
Yeah.
I really wasn't sure I was even going to do this at all until I sat in the first meeting with ICS as we were getting ready to kick things off. And I looked at the amount of experience on their side of the table, and I looked at the amount of experience on our side of the table. And that's when I decided that I would put forth the offer. And if you want me to walk away, I'm more than happy to do that. If you want me to stick around and work with Dan and Tammy and Kelly on a transition for a year, I'm happy to do that.
Well, when I first looked this over, I want you to know and publicly state it's more than generous. Your expertise, your experience is worth double this.
Well, if I was going to ask my going rate, I'd be asking 3 times that. To be honest with you. I've already had other job offers, and so having a job is not something that I really want to do. It's more out of loyalty to the district than anything else.
And I think all of us understand and appreciate that, but in the interest of transparency on this, I think it bodes for this type of discussion.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The other piece that I have a concern with this about is it and I know you, it doesn't say you're obligated to X. And I know you would surpass whatever X would be anyway, but did you realize that when you put it in, when writing this up, it isn't, from my reading, this could be for a day a week, it could be for 5 days a week, it could be for it doesn't give a,
And the reason I wrote it that specific way is in talking with ICS, in talking with Wold Architects, when you saw the schedule up there, there will be some times that it might be 0 days a week. There might be some times it's 5 days a week. But I'll guarantee you get your money's worth.
that's why I started it that way, I have no doubt about it, but it does put you in a position of, what if we insisted it was 5 days a week, you know? That would be very
negotiate.
Yeah.
But fair questions, and I agree.
And again,
we
it's
need
not-
to have the discussion because.
It's all about that.
Yeah.
That is entirely about that.
Great way to do it.
I see it as a great advantage for us. I see it as a great advantage for Dan. Our goal as a board is to support Dan coming in and having the greatest success possible. So another piece to this is I think you should have as much control of this as we do. So if it's not working out in your eyes, that you have a way to say, not just us.
And we're going to support you, and you are the authority, or that would be your duty. The duties are clearly defined and they are parallel, and so.
I feel your support. I feel.
And that's what I'm trying to convey.
Well, and that's why I wrote it up this way also, is I'll support Dan as much as he would like when it comes to operational. But I do know that I'm no longer in charge of operations, and so that would strictly be redirected to him. The construction piece, that Dan had asked me a question of a little more in depth that I don't have an answer for, so I won't even tell you what the question was because I don't have an answer for it, of what and how we'll work together on that construction piece. And so that's why I put on there that it would be reporting directly to the superintendent and the leadership and oversight committee. I'm not going to be here at board meetings giving updates. This is my last one. I'll probably be watching though, making sure that things are going in the right directions, or if there's things that I can point out that could work a little differently, I'll be willing to do that. But when it comes to the operations, I'll be strictly up with Dan. I'll be available whenever he wants to call or answer emails or come in and meet. I'm open either way. But this would be mainly for the construction piece.
Well, again, I greatly appreciate it, and as along with all of your other service to the district, this is a reflection of the person you are, the leader you are, and I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you.
And some of what has brought us to this is just things to be under control. The perfect storm of transitioning administration and the referendum passing, so we have a $63 million project, and then let's put COVID with
A worldwide pandemic.
So,
All of the
you know,
events.
how best can we ensure a successful completion of a building project, get our kids back in school in the best way as soon as possible? And, you know, I see Craig as being a good fit for it because of his history and because of his expertise and knowledge. But it's certainly the board's pleasure how we move forward, and there's never, you know, only one way. But I support it. I have no problem supporting it when I talk to people. This is the direction we go. I'm only one person, so.
Now, I will guarantee you that the end date is the end date.
Oh, whatever.
But even though there's no agreement, I might still be at that construction shack once a week, once that ground is broken.
Just for coffee?
Yeah. Just for coffee.
Because Jody needs a break.
Hey, watching those other building projects go up was a lot of fun.
And a lot of work, and I mean, I think we
Absolutely.
reflect that in contracts with our administrators, and maybe not as much as we reflected in the superintendent's contract. I mean, we hire a superintendent for X, and now we just added building, you know, fairly large building project on top of COVID, on top, to mix into that whole mix. So, that makes sense.
Well, it does require, we have a motion to table. Motion and a second. Is there further discussion or call the question? Okay, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
And the motion-
Sorry, Mr. Schultz.
And the motion
No, that's fine, I
passes
understand.
with, the motion passes. Five in favor, one opposed. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for your thoughtfulness. Next is second reading of the policy, post-issuance debt compliance policy, which we had first reading last month. Need a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Bob Jensen, second by Tammy. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Now, we consider adoption of a resolution adopting the post-issuance debt compliance policy for tax exempt and tax advantage governmental bonds.
That's why I have Tammy here, just in case you have any more questions about that. She speaks that language.
Go ahead, Scott. We have a motion. Scott, second, please, somebody?
Second.
Bob Woods, second. Discussion. This is just the policy that we revised. The motion before. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thought we'd never get to item 23.
Drum roll, please.
Oh, in person! Oh my goodness, what a surprise!
In
What a
person.
great-
This is kind of a chair. I don't feel that way today.
Don't jump to the conclusion there right away.
Suspense has been all day.
What did you get?
22?
Yeah.
Oh, you got
seconded.
I second.
Scott, Bob, did you make
Did you have one of
the
these?
motion on item 22?
Scott and Woods.
Scott Woods. He's first and second.
Scott and Bob Woods.
Yeah. The other one before that was Bobby and Tammy for 21. We did 20.
I said something.
Yeah.
Well, I hope you bring good news.
I feel like Santa Claus.
Oh, boy!
So I'm not gonna bury the lead. I'm gonna start with the punchline, and hopefully you'll all enjoy it. As you know, we took bids today on the bonds, delivering a win-win-win. Borrowing amount is less. The tax impact is lower than we talked about with the voters during the election, and there's about 1.2 or 1.6 million. I gotta look at the numbers again. There's a lot more money for project costs.
Well,
The interest rate, you got 6 bid this morning. The low bid was 1.99%.
wow.
Interest
I
rate.
were close.
I just said to myself, if we could do two,
So I
it's so
just-
nice, and I just think we did two.
From now on, when we're scheduling a bond sale, I'm gonna call you all. I'm gonna say, all right, when should we schedule this? Because you scheduled this perfectly. No, it's a, the markets have been crazy for the last, and you all know, even just from watching, generally where interest rates have gone, the markets have been up and down. They've really stabilized over the last month or so, but we've seen a lot of demand for municipal bonds in the last week or two. Yesterday, the Roseau School District sold their bonds, and it's a 25-year issue, so it's longer. They had 8 bids as well, 2.15%. So there's an appetite out there for bonds. This is a nice big bond issue. The one little quirk in the silver lining is that because of the additional debt load on the school district, the rating for the district was downgraded from A+ to A, but you still carried that AAA credit enhanced rating into the bond sale today, and you can see from the results that, it didn't really have an impact on the bids that you got. And so, great results. And we don't need to dwell a lot line by line on the sale day report, but let's just flip through it and kind of give you a sense of where things landed. You guys are pros at issuing bonds now. We can skim this a bit. I mentioned the rating, and the rating report is in here. We Craig and Tanner did a great job. Dan was on the call, so he's initiated. So when we start refinancing the original Trailview bonds in a couple of years, Dan will be ready to help get the rating back up. So that's the other thing, is the rating is really, the downgrade is really related to debt load. They talk about your strong, general fund finances. So as you pay off debt over time and we do refinancings, and hopefully we'll have the opportunity to try and get some upward pressure back on the rating. But as I mentioned, 6 bids, a low bidder is Baird out of Milwaukee at 1.99%. Even the high bid was a good bid at 2.29%. So if you look in italicized, that's where we describe the premium. So the premium premium amount in the bid was $3.34 million, and that was a little higher than we projected in the pre-sale. So we lowered the bond amount from $60,305,000 to $61,660,000. And then the note at the bottom of page 1, interest rates have declined significantly since we set up the bond issue way back in January. And the 1.99 is obviously lower than the 3.4 that we talked about with the public during the election. Total in principal and interest on the bond is almost $10 million lower over the life of the bonds compared to what we talked about during the election. Now, you do qualify for state aid, so you just kind of handed the state back some money because of the good interest rate, but you also lower the tax impact for your taxpayers. So it's about a $5.5 million reduction in tax levies and about a $4 million reduction in future state aid payments. And so you're helping to solve that state deficit. So really great results for your taxpayers. Let's flip quick through the attachments. Attachments page 1 and 2 are the bids. And as I mentioned, Baird out of Milwaukee actually had a large syndicate of bidders. And my favorite bank was part of their syndicate. If you look at the very bottom, I don't even know what bank this is, but the second from the bottom is Dinosaur Security. They are part of the group that purchased the bonds. But you did have national interest from Wells Fargo out of their Charlotte office, JP Morgan, New York, Mesirow in Chicago, Citigroup, New York, Morgan Stanley, New York. So all the big East Coast banks that we expect to see participate in the bidding did sit up and notice when you brought your bonds to the market. So that was great to see that national interest and bring down the more interest you have, the better opportunity you have for a lower interest rate. So this third page of the attachments is the side-by-side comparison of how much we plan to generate for project costs versus the results of the sale with the premium bid. And so as you can see, the net available for project costs at $62 million, just over $62 million, is about $1.25 million higher than what we had designated during the election. So that's a nice contingency for you as you work through the project. And obviously it has to be consistent with what the ballot question said and the review and comment included, but it's a nice little cushion there as you move through the project. That plan on page 4 with the really small numbers is the standard thing that we show you when we lay out the principal and interest payments. There's a chart though that's a little bit more explanatory on page 5. It kind of shows how we're wrapping the new bond around the existing debt. This is exactly what we've seen all through the process, except the bars are all a little shorter because the taxes are lower. And you see the result of that on page 6, the tax impact table. So I realized we didn't label the column. The first column is the pre-election estimates, and the second column is bond results, bond sale results. So if you pick that $150,000 home, we talked during the election about a $407 annual tax impact, and at these interest rates, for taxes payable 2021, the tax impact will be closer to $366, so about a 10% reduction in the tax impact. So that's great news for your taxpayers. They obviously the majority said they were willing to participate, and now it's going to cost them a little bit less for that. And you get a great investment in your facilities. So The last attachment, or page 7 is the last kind of attachment from us. I wanted to put this chart in just to show, kind of where things have been. Just going back a couple of years and where they are now. And obviously rates can move, and as we planned for the bond election in January, we built in some cushion in case rates spiked. We'd sold these bonds a month ago. They might have been closer to what we talked about during the election, but we're really at a great low point right now in interest rates, and a great time to take advantage of that and borrow money at extremely low rates. The last attachment then is the S&P rating report, and I'll just point out on page 10, kind of the bullet points are their main description of what the rating is based on. And so you have very strong reserves, even though you've spent down those reserves intentionally over the last couple of years, and we made that clear to them during the rating call. They know that the economy is slightly limited, but you have had steady growth in tax values, and they describe your personal income measures as adequate. But 3, the third bullet point, high overall debt burden, and it's hard to disagree with them, but they say we're putting pressure on the budget. You have the authority to levy, and the general obligation pledge to levy for all of your debt service payments, so there's really no operating budget pressure because of issuing this debt. But they always get nervous when there are big bond issues. And I was telling Craig and Tammy as we talked when we got the rating that it's been about 50-50 on the districts that have gone into these large bond issues that have gotten downgrades just because of the debt burden, and it ranges from White Bear Lake, which is sort of a growing big school district that things are going great in, and they received a downgrade when they issued. It was $250 million, but the same concept, a large amount for relative to that school district and other districts that have not had downgrades. And so, we make the argument, and they go back and they have their meeting, and we see what happens. And so, but again, great interest rates regardless of that.
I can't imagine we could have had any better.
What's that?
You couldn't
I
imagine it would have been any better with the.
Is there anybody that's done better than lately?
On a 20-year bond, I don't know that we've broken 2. I'm trying to remember if we've had anything. There have been a couple in the 1.5s recently, but they have been, I think, 15-year bonds. 1.5, 1.75 in January and February when the first part of that dip happened. We were seeing rates I think 207, and was one of the lower rates we saw during that period right before March when rates had dipped. So yeah, this is just in really, really a great result. So
I'm happy to report this.
I think Greg really helped with that as well on those S&P calls. They asked a lot of questions. They had given us a narrative. I don't remember how many questions were on that sheet that Tammy and I worked on. And I said Tammy first because she did most of it and prepared and got ready for that. But Greg just continually reminded them, but you have to remember we have the our ag credit piece going on in Minnesota. We have this piece going on in Minnesota. This school district is doing this and has been doing this for years, and he just really was in there swinging for us constantly. So thank you as well for that process.
I think it was a good team effort, and we did our best, so yeah, we ended up with a great result. So,
Well, without further ado, I need a motion to adopt a resolution awarding the sale.
Second.
Motion by Scott, second by Ethan. Any further discussion? This motion requires a roll call vote, so I'll start with you, Bob Jensen.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
And that motion passes unanimously. With 6 in favor, 0 opposed.
Okay, why can't we refinance the Why is that a problem?
Those bonds aren't callable, or we'd be out in the market with them right now.
Be nice to lock it all in at that.
Whatever we're doing now, just continue down the same path and we'll be
Yeah.
hopefully okay.
Yeah. So, let me just say congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's been so, it's been ups and downs over the last 8, 9 years.
You've had to make a lot of trips up, an awful lot of tax statements and set up websites and answer questions for taxpayers, probably more than any other district you've worked with.
Just don't tell us
over that
if
time
you
frame.
felt it would ever pass or not, we don't want to know.
I do want to say thank you though.
Well,
And,
thank you.
It's been fun to be, next to Craig for all this time and supporting you. Sad to see you go from this role, but I've really enjoyed the time, that we've had to get to know each other a little better and fight the battles together. And I appreciate just that you've chosen to continue working with us and continue to keep trying to move forward. And it's great.
We
to
always
finally
knew we
get
were
over the goal
getting
line.
accurate information and all we could do then was push it out and
Yeah.
You've
just had.
made that choice easy.
Definitely.
Yeah, so thank you. Congrats. Can we pause for a minute so I can get a couple of signatures before I walk
Sure.
out the door?
Yeah.
So
We're not
I've
going
got,
anywhere.
That is just
I
so
just
awesome.
started crying imagine that.
It's an emotional journey. There's two of those here.
I know, yeah. When you know how sticky and outward the emotional I am.
It's a weight
So-
lifted.
Just.
What great news.
Scott's much quicker than I am.
Yeah. I'm excited to come and see the whole complex when it's done. That's a little off, but yours off.
Is it?
But as fast as time goes,
All right.
we'll look back and say, wow, it's just 3 years since you were here. Well, thank you, Greg. Appreciate you coming up.
Thanks
Thanks again, Greg.
As I worked with Karen and built the agenda, I should have put that LLC right after this instead of right before.
Funny, right? Yeah.
It is what it is. We're moving forward, one way or the other. I think that brings us to board reports. I don't see any other, administrative update, no more action items. So are there any board members that would like to report?
Yeah, I had East Central Regional Development Commission annual meeting on Monday, everything via Zoom, so. The biggest stuff, we actually just got we got 2 more grants in, one for $550,000 and one for $400,000 to help with economic recovery in the ECRDC coverage area, particularly related to small businesses and getting it out there. We're hiring a coordinator for that to help push through, so there'll be more information coming on that. Then there's lots of stuff with scenic byways and all that, but the biggest news was that, those additional grants, again, to help our local small, businesses, and a lot of that's going to be publications and, the ways that they can use advertising, get back and get them on their feet. So it's not necessarily stimulus type money, but ways that, what can the ECRDC do to help them. And the study and it will also affect how the cities and schools and counties and townships can help them as well.
Does this seem fairly equitable from county to county?
Yeah.
Is it sort of pro rata or?
Well, like I said, if this is gonna be, we're hiring somebody, then they'll be putting out advertisements, so I'll just pick, if Sherman Lumber needs some, help, and they see that, say, oh, hey, great, what can we do? And then there'll be an application process. And that is more of, not necessarily sort of application for dollars, but applications for assistance in what this person can do for them. So it's not, the dollar amounts are just kind of, what are the costs involved with putting out, whether it's radio ads, TV ads, different things, like that. So each one is gonna be a little bit different, but that's certainly
Not
still
so
gonna be in
based on
process.
population or demographics?
Correct.
comparing Kanevik to Chisago or?
No. We don't have any of that, at least as of now. This is,
How
we just,
often, how often are those meetings?
every 2 months.
Oh,
So 6 times a year.
thanks for volunteering.
Yeah.
Okay, any other board?
I had a rubber meeting last week. It was again over the telephone, or you could dial it if you had internet. That's really nice. We were up at Two Harbors, and I could do it right from the condo. And it's so nice to be able to keep, you need to go on vacation, but you still need to keep abreast of the different committees and stuff that you're on, and I hope someday we get there. So it was just a normal meeting, so I had nothing really to address, but I just wanted to bring up that it's so nice to be able to do it electronically.
Very nice.
I was able to go on the tours the other day, and just, it was a good group. What were there, 30-some?
30, yeah.
That were on that.
Well, there was 30 on the buses, then we had a few cars.
Right, I had to drive separate, so. But one of the things that really that I wanted to bring back to the board was that Wold was there. So Vaughn was in there with notes and just, because his company didn't design any of these buildings. So he was going through and like, oh, this is cool, but if they would have thought of this, and then he was pointing out things like lockers and angles of things, and so I think we have a really good team on our side to get this done and take the best of these ideas and meld them into one for us.
Wold had 4 people there.
Was it 4?
Yeah.
Oh, and obviously I only know Vaughn, so you'd be walking along, and he'd pull up my shirt and goes, well, did you see, look at this? And then he stopped the whole group and look at these lockers. If they would have just done this, then you couldn't jump on top of them. And it was fun to watch him just creatively go through those buildings.
And thanks for taking the time to go and participating in that group. Hopefully you'll make most of the meetings too.
Hope I should be able to make next week.
Are you part of it, Tammy?
I am not able to with the really odd work schedule that I have right now, which is unfortunate because that's something I really wanted to be a part of, but those times just, I can't swing them at all.
But with this stuff, don't you want to be part of everything? There's like this
Well,
football thing, like, I want to do it, but I gotta work.
Well,
Tammy, don't feel guilty. You and I were there last time.
You have figured out how to administer anesthesia over Zoom.
And along that same line, Bob, I don't want meetings from Zooms, I want vacations. I want to get the heck away from this stuff.
I just feel like I lose something every time. It's like, oh God.
We'll keep it
I know later, and I'm like, Jesus, gravity.
Okay, thank you, board members. Tammy?
Not a meeting, but I just want to touch on graduation, and because we had a board meeting before graduation even happened, and I just want to thank Mora Public Schools, the staff, everybody who helped put that together. It was pretty amazing. It was really special, enjoyable, and it was a great way to send my first one off into the big kid world, I guess. So thanks for all of the help and all of the thought and the time and energy and effort that went into all of it. It was really a big deal for those kids. So much appreciated.
Brent and Chris Jacobson put a lot of time into that, as well as a number of staff members. As you saw on that day, how many staff members it took for directing traffic and keeping everything moving and smooth, and it was a tremendous effort by the staff.
And Lisa, Tim, and Lynn Byer for their efforts in taking all the photos and trying to catch every single opportunity possible.
And people keep coming up to our daughters and saying, oh, I'm so sorry for all that you've lost your senior year, but they really have had experiences as they have lost, so I don't want to diminish that, but the positives and the things that have come out of pulling a community together, getting the district staff, it's not just the high school staff, it was everybody involved with this was really special.
Sure.
That's through this entire thing since March 15th. we've had calls with the Department of Education, superintendent calls, director calls. The first one is the only one that I was on by myself. We were told very specifically we couldn't give that number out to call in. But we did something a little different here, is that we set up a Google Meet, and I had anywhere from 10 to 15 people sitting in. The staff has really stepped up across the board on this, volunteering, willing to do stuff. It's been phenomenal, and that's what's made us successful through this.
It's inspirational, it really is.
And even Tim, thank you.
Especially Tim.
With all your
A
technical
few hard stopping
difficulties.
moments and
Yeah.
got through it anyway. Count on Tim. All right, let's move on to activities, community ed.
Well, you've got my board report, but I just wanted to add in there that you probably already know that last Friday, the MPH updated their guidance, so they kind of loosened things up a little bit more for our activities. So pod sizes for both inside and outside is 25, so that's a good thing. Having the wellness center for the basketball program, they've actually just put one person at each basket. They gave them, marked their basketballs, told them to take them home, bring them back with memory time. So now they'll sanitize and do what they're supposed to do. And full team practices they began on June 24th. Scrimmages and play for outside sports began June 24th. Inside sports will begin July 1. So the blackout dates for the State High School League are July 3rd through the 5th, so I think most of the indoor, they're going to put it on hold until after the blackout date, but then they would like to bring in possibly Ogilvy or Bram or some close schools to start scrimmaging with. We're going to recommend that we don't have any spectators in there, that it's only players in there, so I just want you to know that's what we have planned for both the boys and the girls basketball as of right now. Weight rooms are still off limits to everybody. Troy has got squat racks set up outside. He's got 4 different racks. He's got stuff scheduled Monday, Wednesday, Friday, morning sessions, afternoon sessions. They're doing team breakfasts, well, not team, but pod breakfasts every morning. So he's making the best of it out there as he can. So and then Tuesdays, Thursdays, other coaches have access to the weights if they choose to come up with exercise.
So Chris,
Yes.
the wellness center, there's basketball and everything going on in there. Is the upstairs open to
Yes.
the public again too?
Yep. An email
Is
went
there a
out to the
spot-
members and it got changed on the website.
Did it get changed? I couldn't find it on the website. I
It was
spent,
changed today.
okay.
Yep, it was opened up today, everything's go back on.
What category is?
It's on the community ed, under the
I
community ed tab on the school website.
I and several people at work looked today and we couldn't.
Would there be an update in the times next week in the community events
On the
for the
website.
people that don't go to the website or, I mean, I heard it from a community member just 2 days ago too, or he asked, he said, is
Yeah.
it open again? And I really didn't know, because I hadn't checked the website, but he thought he had heard it was.
Right.
Word will get around, but it would be good for communication, just to put a note in the community events or the updates for
Yep, and we could do
COVID
that.
cancellations.
We kind of wanted, in my mind, to do it kind of slow.
Okay.
Yeah,
Oh.
Got it.
so we started with the members. Amy had the first day sent out a mass email to everybody. We talked today, she changed it on the website. We definitely can come up with something and get something in the paper.
Thanks.
Put it in the what's happening section.
Thanks.
Trying to be
Appreciate it.
aware of the need to share information with the community, so, good.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, thank you.
And our transportation buildings and grounds update is in your packet. I don't know if there's anything further on that, probably not, Craig, so ask questions later if you have. Principals updates. Come on in. You getting any updates from principals tonight, or no? I just saw you in the hall, and I wasn't
First
sure
base.
if you were just stretching or.
Quick update on the expansion of our school garden. Last week, we worked with fifth grade and Master Gardeners, and we did some expansion there. 8 small gardens were purchased with a grant from the Master Gardeners, and Valerie Prax organized that again, so kudos to her. And we had the fifth grade team up there, Darren, Kayla, Debbie, filling those gardens and getting them updated for the summer, so they gave up a lot of valuable time. Appreciate that.
That's a cool project.
We were looking at expanding that over, there's an outdoor classroom that was overgrown last year that we're trying to clean up and get ready for the fall.
Which would be great, because they are suggesting that we teach kids outside a lot, so that would be really
So
good.
that's just that, we can refurbish.
Another thing that I included on here was a curriculum piece. The science content team met the week of June 8th. 13 teachers worked for 18 hours. They did incredible work. It's their year 2 of that curriculum cycle we developed a couple years ago. So this is their big year for their curriculum work on the new standards. So they took their rainbow grids that we've showed you a few different times, and now they are taking those new standards and developing the new classes. It's a different way to teach science than we have in the past. We'll have to change some of the subject content areas around in the high school due to where the standards fall. But I included, we came up with a whole matrix of when those classes will be introduced, knowing that 2023, 2024, that'll be the first year that we're tested on those standards. So we kind of backed that up to when we needed to start teaching those subjects. So they did a great job, got a lot of work done, and we'll get that all on our curriculum site as soon as we get all the COVID stuff done. Whatever that is.
Thank you.
You'd be rich if you had that.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody. I don't think Brent or Nick have it, or Brent, did you have anything you wanted
Well, I
to
just wanted
share?
to comment on, I sent an email to all of you from the GPS 4593.
I finally
and
got an
Mora.
email from you.
Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Can I read one part of that?
Sure.
Rapidly growing regional center. As the county seat of Kanabec County, Mora is a regional hub for shopping and entertainment, healthcare, recreation, community services, and manufacturing. It is located 1 hour north of Minneapolis-St. Paul in one of the fastest growing regions of Minnesota. In fact, the region's workforce grew at twice the pace of the rest of the state in the 2000s. Its population is projected to grow by 20% through 2035. That means Mora has an available workforce to meet the changing needs of new or expanding businesses.
Great to hear.
Encouraging.
Just exciting, the new high school and then the growth and.
That's a good note. That's a good note to everyone. Thank you. And normally we have a superintendent's update. I have not
Yeah, do you?
seen one. I thinking there may not be one.
2.5-hour board meeting. I started on my report, and most everything that I had to say was all official actions that you needed to take tonight, so we've covered everything that I can think of.
Well then, yeah, and we were planning a little roast presentation, but it got kind of late, so we'll just forget the roast, or maybe we'll roast you too, but we'll try to make it quick. But we do have a little presentation for you. And there's cupcakes, everybody, too, when you leave tonight. It's so weird we can't all be in here, but in anticipation of June 30th, 2020, I just have thought for quite a while, so it's gonna be really strange. And so on a serious note, first anyway, I'll speak and give everybody a chance to speak to it. I don't have a lot of words because I think we can say pretty succinctly the evidence speaks for what you've done in 11 years if you look at more school data. And I just want to say that I personally appreciate the continuity that you have given us for 11 years and brought with it your leadership, your vision, the execution of everything under your watch. And I'm going to leave it at that and just say I really appreciate your time with us, after all 11 of them, and they'll be missed. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm going to give others a chance if they want to add anything. A card is coming to you from the board. We do have a little roast, however, and I'm going to let Scott take care of that. If he wants to do it now.
Yeah, usually, maybe we planned ahead, or at least I did last January, but just a little gift in memory of the MSBA conferences and maybe the late night visiting that would go on. And
No, you didn't Steve list it.
oh, not that. I mean,
He bought the frame. He's
I had a frame, yeah. So just that little knock on the door.
Well,
between
and
Tammy
so
Black
for,
and,
to
yeah.
let people in on the joke, Scott, you want to tell them, we were
It's,
just calling the carpet twice
It's
in
a
1
quiet
day.
hour sign from, which one were we at? Yeah, the Hilton, the Hilton last year. We were visited a couple of different times by the, powers that be, was that?
Security.
Just because, well, yeah, because he always leave the door cracked a little bit so people could come and go.
So
and-
then it was the second night that the sign
Yeah.
appeared down by the
Yeah.
elevators or on the hall or
Yeah.
something.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
But you
Just a
know.
lot of laughter and a lot of, just camaraderie. And that is just, like I said, just so much fun. That's certainly memories that I have of the MSBA and of you and of all this, in addition to what Karen had said. But it's just something I couldn't resist that night. That's gotta come home with us.
Well, and the sad thing is, after they posted the sign, you gotta call the second night too.
Yep.
Guess
We don't learn.
more.
No. But again, just everything that Greg had to say with all the numbers and everything that we had in there with our budgets, all of those things. And as you and I sat down on a lot of those things, and things that we've known for a long, long time, our reserves, all of that, of how that all plays in to help us be a better school board and to have a great school district. Yep, we're all nervous for next year and the budgets and that to come, but we couldn't be setting in a better position than we are for it. So we can't control what's coming, other than what we've done in the past to set us, up for it. We've got a reserve, so we're not nervous if we have to spend $100,000 on supplies this year. We've got it. It's there. It's not daunting. It's not like you're going, oh geez, we're going into operating debt now because, But thank you. I appreciate it. I just wanted to, just a little memento.
And thank you for your support as well. Not an easy job every day, but there are some days that it's a lot of fun. And I'd say there's a lot more fun days than there were days that weren't so fun. And I know that you'll give your support to Dan as we transition into him taking over. And this, I've worked with 10 board members here at Mora, and it's been great. So appreciate it.
With that, correspondence was coming around. You can look at upcoming dates. Any other board business we can not adjourn. Second open forum. If you wish to speak. If not, entertain a motion for adjournment. We're adjourned. We don't need a motion. So stand in.
Bob says no.
We have a motion by Bob. Somebody please second it. Put Scott's name on there. Thank you, everybody.
And thank you.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's right there.
And if I remember, I guess at the very back. I think it's so easy to find.